So even even in the myriad of traditions of witchcraft, these are basics. Those are real basics. And there's a lot of room for flexibility, as you can probably guess.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
Right.
In your book, Dark Moon Mysteries, you have a list of fairy tales. You have a bunch of different fairy tale stories. Now, do you just go through the fairy tales and then explain them, or how does that work? Now, what does that one? What does the fairy tales have as far as significance in the book as with witchcraft?
Well, fairy tales are tales that are written down now, but they're tales that used to be told by someone just like me or some other witch. It would be told by the village wise person, wise man, wise woman. And it was an oral tradition, and they were told because they were trying to give messages about how to live our lives. They were trying to give messages about things that go on inside of us. They relate to deep fears, experiences that are common to all of humanity. And so at nighttime or whenever these people would get together, we don't know much about Old Europe because once the Romans and the Christians came in, all of the culture that was pre-Roman, pre-Christian was stamped out, and then new gods and new religions sprung up, and their way of dealing with old religions and old gods was to completely annihilate them. So we don't know a lot about what happened in Old Europe. But if we looked at other cultures around the world and we see how shamans and witches from across the world in tribal cultures, what their role is to be the storyteller, to be the healer. And so the stories that we have now, the stories that are told by the Brothers Grimm, the stories that are all familiar to us, Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, a lot of those stories are stories that were once told by the shaman of the village to give insight about how you should be approaching your life. And so that's the same reason why I use them in the book. I use them to highlight ways that you might be able to approach your own life to help you to guide your life in a more focused way.
Okay, so were they used sort of like a religious way of passing off? I don't know where I'm trying to go here. With the fairy tales, I mean, were they sort of like religious wise tales, or just good
Yes, exactly.
common sense?
It's hard to separate out. We tend to, in our culture, we separate out a lot of things. We tend to separate out, okay, well, this is religion, this is politics, this is psychology, this is sociology. We separate all those things, and it makes us easier to take in that information. Of course, if everything was a big jumble, we wouldn't be able to understand stuff.
Right.
The trick in learning, and any good college professor would agree to this, the trick in learning material is actually being able to synthesize it and see how it all interrelates. And the same thing with this topic, that it's a mix. It's a mix of religion, psychology, sociology, it's, ecology. It's a mix of a lot of things. So when you say, well, was it a religious way of trying to give information or truths? Yes, it was, but it was also a way, it was talking about things that go on in those deep parts of us that are common for all of us. It's a way of communicating experiences that we all have. We all have the same kind of emotions. We all feel really angry at times. We all are so afraid of our destiny that we run from the palace and leave our glass slipper on the stair.
Mm-hmm.
As in the case of Cinderella.
Okay.
So even though the stories might be told, as, say, for instance, in Cinderella, it may be told as though the female is the hero of the story. It actually relates to both men and women. There are parts of us that are just like that, and the trick is to identify with each of the characters of the story and to see how we fit in with each of those characters, how we do each of the things that each of those people are doing.
Okay. How come I feel like I've just been through a philosophy lesson? I don't know. I appreciate talking with you, and It's Timothy Roderick. I got it right this time, right?
You got it right.
Oh, thank goodness. And the book is called Dark Moon Mysteries, Wisdom, Power, and Magic of the Shadow World. And thanks for sharing this Halloween mystery. Now, is Halloween a significant day for witchcraft?
It is. Halloween is the high holy day of witches. It was the high holy day in Europe that was celebrated. It's like we have it here in Southern California. We see it really closely. We have the Mexican Day of the Dead that's celebrated here, and that happens on the day just after Halloween.
Okay.
Showing that another culture celebrates the idea of death as Halloween is supposed to be a celebration of death as a renewal of life, that we have to go through death. It's just one of the aspects of life.
Okay.
So that's what it is.
Okay, and to get the book, it's you can call the toll-free number 1-800-THE-MOON.
Or you can go to Barnes & Noble or B. Dalton or any of the other bookstores around you.
Right, okay, Barnes & Noble we have right here that I'm at Carrier Books. Now, the thing that scares you about the number, though, the 1-800-THE-MOON, of course, moon comes out as 6666. So, that's...
It depends on which mythology you come from.
Yeah.
If you want to believe that means devil, go ahead. If you want to be scared.
All right, but okay, just kind of right there, just another thing. You think about the moon, and you think about anyway. Won't get into that, but it's just one of those Halloween things. But anyway, thank you very much for talking with me. I appreciate it, and for what I've read so far, I haven't had a chance to read the whole book. I've enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we're talking with Dr. Hazel Denning, Ph.D., and the book is called True Hauntings, Spirits with a Purpose. I like the title. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I have to mention this. I mean, I hope you don't mind, but one thing that was pointed out to me is that you're 89 years young.
That's right.
Yeah, and I just find it fascinating. The book, I've been reading the book, and I've really been fascinated with it because it's answered a lot of questions for me too. You are actually one of the a true Ghostbuster, so to speak.
Well, yes, I really don't like that term Ghostbuster, but that says it.
Okay, well, because people ask you to come in their house and not really get rid of a ghost, but
Well,
find.
Yes, they do want me to get rid of
Okay,
it.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people in the book, Gertrude, was that the name?
That's one of them, yes.
Okay, yeah, she, a psychic that you use. Do you still use her quite often, or no?
No, not anymore. We did this for about 10 or 12 years, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. When we did this a number of years ago, people didn't even believe it. I mean, they thought it was made up. They thought it was fake. They said there's no such things as ghosts, and I got tired of that, and so I just decided not to do it anymore.
Oh, really? Just because of all the people not believing in it, or?
Not just that, but you do something for a while, and then you'd like to do something else.
Okay, now I know you've been on quite a few shows like Oprah and Joan Rivers and a few other ones like that, right?
Yes.
In talking about it. Now, do you still lecture and
Yes, I still lecture. I don't lecture on that subject very often. See, my thing really is past life regression therapy, and the purpose of that, of course, is to help people solve their problems, and that's what I'm more interested in now.
Okay, all right. Now, with the book, the name of it is called True Hauntings and Spirit with a Purpose. Now, Spirits with a Purpose. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yes, if there's a reason for spirits to hang around a building or a house or people, there's a reason for them to do that. And so part of the book, the first part of the book, explains why spirits hang around houses. There are different reasons. Sometimes they stay around a house because they're afraid to leave. It's interesting. I discovered that spirits, when they die or when people die, if they've not lived a good life, if they've done some bad things, often feel that if they leave the place, they will go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And our culture teaches that if you're bad, you're going to go to hell. And so some people believe that. So they hang around because they feel safe. Others hang around because they want to help the people they left. Others hang around because they are waiting for somebody. Quite often an older person, for instance, will wait around until their spouse dies, and then they go off together. So there are different reasons why they hang around a place.
Okay, I've experienced a few different things. I've never really come in contact with a so-called ghost. I've always been interested, but I had an aunt that lived in Wisconsin that always talked about the ghost in her house, and there was a story in there I was reading, and it was similar to that because she used to have a rocking chair that if she put it right by the window in a certain place, it would always start rocking on its own. If she moved it anywhere else, it wouldn't do that.
Yes, oh yes.
And there was a story in there that I was reading that said it was I guess it was a rocking chair by a fireplace, and then every time somebody sat in that chair by the fireplace, they felt uncomfortable, and that was because there was a ghost that wanted to sit there at that time in front of the fireplace.
That's right.
Okay, now can you explain a little bit of how you rid the house of ghosts?
Well, there's a formula that's very simple, and it seems to be used by almost all Ghostbusters that I know. To tell the person to go to the light. And to go to the light simply means that they move on and are aware of being in the other dimension where there are other spirits there that will help them. And so the purpose of our purpose really is to liberate spirits when we work in this field because they are earthbound, what we call earthbound. And, I think it's interesting. I think that the Catholic purgatory, this is the same area as what the Catholics call purgatory.
Okay, limbo, yeah.
There are some spirits are afraid to leave, and so they hang around the earth. And of course, some hang around because they're angry, and they want to get even with people that are here. For some reason, if they have an enemy or someone they don't like, they'll make it very unpleasant for that person.
Okay. And there was one story I was reading where this a ghost stayed with a woman because she was very unhappy, and the ghost was trying to make her happy.
Oh yes, yeah. That little Rebecca. Her name had been Rebecca when she was on the earth, and she had worked as a medium, or she had worked as a channel with this woman who was a medium, and the woman had a husband who was very ill, and so she was very unhappy. He was ill and large and grumpy, and she had to take care of him at home, and so her life was pretty unhappy, and so little Rebecca stayed around him. Supposedly, she said, to make her happy.
Okay, and you said eventually in your book, you said that eventually the woman was happy enough where she decided she could go to the other side.
Yeah, the woman's husband died, and so she began to travel and enjoy life, and it was interesting because when I talked to Rebecca. Now I say I talked to her, but I couldn't hear her. But my psychics that I worked with could hear her, and so they would tell me what she said. And I told her at one point to go to the light, and she said, no, I have to stay and keep Rebecca happy. But finally, after the husband died, she decided that she would go to the light. But one time she said, I took your advice, and now I'm taking piano lessons over here. I had told her that she should improve herself and not just stay earthbound.
Huh. Now, my mother-in-law might not like this, but I remember she always told me a story about when she was young and her brother passed away in the war. That she had seen him, he had come to her before or after he died and whatever, and she found out the next day that he had been killed in the war. Now that happens quite often, right? Before, when somebody dies, they come to the. There was a story I was reading about a gentleman coming to his wife and saying he's sorry he had to leave her and the kids, and she found out that he had died in the war or something like that.
Yes, and at the moment of death, quite often the soul will come back to the persons they're leaving and tell them. I've had many, many, many people tell me that they knew when another person died that was close to them. Mm-hmm. They just suddenly just knew that person was dead, and then they'd get word that they were.
Yeah, because I know when my mother passed away, I remember getting called on the phone saying that she had taken a turn for the worse, but through the month of the time that she was dying, they always said that when they called up, and I didn't think anything of it. When I went to wake my father up to let him know that we were going to go to the hospital, he drove extremely slow. So I think he might have had one of those experiences too, but he didn't say anything because I think he already knew.
Oh yes.
And
but also, you may not always see the person, but there's a knowing. When my son died, right after he died, I was getting a meal in the kitchen, and I felt his presence, and I didn't see anything, and I didn't hear anything, but it was so real that I spontaneously said, "Well, hi, son, how are you?" And I felt as if he said to me, "Mom, I want you to know how happy I am to be free,"
Huh.
because he was into drugs and doing a lot of stuff that he shouldn't do, and he wasn't a bad soul, and so he left because he wanted not to do that anymore.
Now, when you say that about people staying on Earth because they felt like they aren't worthy or ready to go to heaven, do you feel that that's? I'm not trying to get into religious side here, but I'm saying, do you feel that people feel that hell is kind of on Earth? They got to stay here on Earth, and they aren't allowed up there, or what?
Well, see, I don't believe in a place called hell. I
Mm-hmm.
think that hell is a state of being, and you can be in hell when you're still living in a body on Earth when life is when life is really tough.
Right.
And and when you go to the other side, the same is true. You're in hell if you're really miserable and unhappy, and you're in heaven if you're happy.
Okay. Okay. Now, Halloween. Do you think is that any bigger of a night for spirits? I mean, I know it's a big night for witches and stuff like that, but I mean, is that a bigger night for spirits that you know of, or?
You know, I really don't know that. They say it is, and they say that spirits are around and more active on Halloween. I have never seen any evidence that that is exactly true. I think that the reason it is because people are celebrating that time, and so they become aware of it, and they plan on activities that foster it, you know.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know that the spirits feel that there's any difference. Do you see what I mean?
Right. I see what you mean. Now you've been doing this for what, 65 years?
Well, I've been in this field for that long, but
Okay.
but it was only about 10 or 12 years that I did ghost busting.
Okay.
The rest of the time, I've investigated paranormal activity and been interested in this field. Yes.
Now, have you written any other books besides the
No, but
True Hauntings?
Well, I've written a monograph about regression therapy. We had a man gave me over $250,000 to do a research project to prove, if I could, that the mind could heal the body of anything, a physical body of anything. In other words, whatever illness you had, you could cure with your mind. And we had real success with that program. We did a 3-year study, saw people for 3 years, then we did a 5-year follow-up. And then I spent about 5 or 6 years putting it all together and writing up this monograph. So I have that. And then I wrote, I've written an awful lot of stuff for magazines and articles and newsletters and things of that sort. But I'm almost finished with my second book. But my second book is on guilt, because I think that guilt is one of the worst things that our civilization suffers. And so many people are guilty about stuff that isn't important enough to be guilty about.
Now, how do you
You know
get?
what I mean by that?
Yeah. Why don't you explain that? Elaborate on that a little bit.
Okay, there are two kinds of guilt, two main kinds of guilt. One we call trait guilt, and the other we call cultural guilt. And the cultural guilt are the shoulds and shouldn'ts. You know, you shouldn't do this, taboos about things that are
Okay.
stupid. And the trait guilt is what you bring with you. And so when people feel guilt, when people come into this life and they've been really bad in the past, they bring guilt with them, and then their life is very miserable, because if a person comes into this life feeling guilty, then they're not worthy of love and acceptance and success, and so many unpleasant things happen to them.
Now, when you say come into the life with guilt, are you saying from being reborn again, or?
Yes, from doing something in the past that's
Okay.
bad.
Okay.
They
And
feel
that's
guilt. For instance, I had one case where this man felt he had been a slave runner in the past, and so when he was just a small child, he was always doing things that would make him be punished. And if his mother didn't punish him, he'd say, "Punish me, what are you trying to do, spoil me?" He never felt worthy of being loved and cared for. He felt that he had to pay for something.
okay. So you think a lot of people, a lot of these different things that are involved with your life, you feel that it came from another life?
Absolutely.
Huh.
This I've had about 38 years experience doing past life regression, and I've listened to thousands and thousands of hours of people recalling their past life and explain the problem in this one.
Okay. Do you still have any ghost busting calls at all anymore, or?
Well, I do. I have a fair amount, but I refer them to somebody else. You see, we have other people who do this. There are 2 people, for instance. There are a lot of people in Los Angeles area, but I know 2 quite well, and I refer people to them.
Okay. All right. Is there any common haunting sites at all that you know of, or I mean, why do some ghosts stay at certain places just because of the certain thing that happened to them there, or?
Well, usually that's the reason they stay. Yes, one of the real quickies that I had that was fascinating was a doctor friend who had a friend with a big old house, and everybody that slept in a certain bedroom said that at midnight a ghost came in and scared the daylights out of them, and so they. My friend said, "Well, I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'll sleep in that room and see what happens." So he did. And sure enough, at midnight, this man appeared before him and held his hands over his face threateningly. And he said, my friend said, "What do you want? Why are you doing this to people?" And the man said, "I was killed in this house and my body is buried in the basement. And I can't, my spirit is restless. I need a decent Christian burial." And now, of course, that was his belief system, you see. And so he couldn't rest. And so, sure enough, he told them exactly where he was buried in the basement. They found his body and gave him a burial, and then there was no more hauntings.
Huh. So now, what about that? Do you think people should not be afraid of ghosts? They should just, just take them on head on and try to find out their problem, or?
Well, that's right. You know, really, spirits do hurt people sometimes, but very rarely. Mostly, they're just wanting attention. They're wanting to let people know they're still living. They're wanting help of some kind, and so they don't hurt you. I mean, when I could help people not be afraid, then we could nearly always free their house. It's the fear. Fear is such a powerful energy that fear attracts these activities often.
Okay, now do you have to be psychic though to speak to these ghosts, or I mean, have some kind of a ability to?
Yeah, you do sort of.
To
I couldn't communicate with them. See, these two women that I worked with were very, very sensitive, and when we'd go into a house, the spirits would say to them, "How come you can talk to us and nobody else can?"
Oh, okay.
Because they could actually communicate just like you and I are communicating.
Huh. That's now.
Is this pretty new to you?
Pardon?
Is this pretty new to you?
Pretty new to me. Well, I've been interested in a lot of this stuff for a long time, but I've never really
Investigated.
No, I never really investigated it, and I never really heard it approached the way that you approach it. As far as because you do have one story in your book that when a ghost was violent was two sisters that have died and tossed their sister, the living sister, and broke her arm or something, or
Yes, and that is possible.
okay. So there are a few of the bad ghosts out there too.
Yeah.
They aren't all Caspers.
Yeah, and you know it's interesting because so many people, particularly fundamental religions, say this is work of the devil and the devil does all this. In all the years that I've worked, I've never found a devil. All the entities that I've found, all the problems that I've found, have been people, spirits from people who died who were bad people.
Okay. How many people have you dealt with that have been possessed, so to speak?
Oh, I've never counted them.
Okay.
There are many.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very common because there's spirits around all the time, and particularly, for instance, I mean, just one group are alcoholics, and it's extremely difficult for alcoholics because they are many times they are possessed by people who died who were alcoholics, and so they are constantly impressed to drink more.
Huh. Now, the possessed people, that has nothing to do with the work of the devil or anything either, or just the people that won't leave.
No, again, in that same field, I simply found spirits dead, and people who were dead, and their spirits were harassing. That's one of the reasons why some spirits stay near the earth, is because they are angry at somebody and they're wanting to get even, and so they make life very miserable for them.
Okay. I've got about 50 more questions, but I'm going to ask just a couple more because we're kind of running out of time. But I was reading one thing about Harvey, the spirit in the radio station. Since I'm here at a radio station, we always had a thing here. I forget the name of the spirit that's supposedly supposed to haunt our WKBZ here, but now this Harvey, this spirit that haunted a radio station, what was that all about, and how did you get rid of him? Do you remember that one?
Oh yes. Yeah, he told us that the reason he was staying there was because his son disappeared, or I mean his son went to war and didn't come back, and he was positive that his son was still alive. They told him his son was dead, but he didn't believe it. And so he told us that he had to stay there so that he'd be there when his son returned. And, of course, it was kind of silly because this had been a number of years, and he was now dead. But when we investigated it, we found that had been a duplex before it was a radio station.
Oh, okay.
And so that's when he had lived there. You see, he was waiting for his son to return. But Harvey he was an interesting fellow because I asked him why he did this stuff to scare people, and he said, "Well, do you realize how boring it is to just sit around and do nothing all the time?"
That's true. I would imagine that being left on Earth to do nothing, you have to have a little fun, right?
Right.
Okay.
He really did have. He made cassettes fly through the air, and he, of course, scared people.
Okay, because we're supposed to have a ghost. I haven't seen any activity here for a while, but supposedly we had a ghost that lived here at WKBZ. So,
did he manifest? How did he manifest?
It's a story, but I'm not sure of the story anymore. It's been a long time since we've talked about it, but I'll have to find out from when we have our 70th anniversary about the story of the ghost here at KBZ. Maybe now that I talk to you, maybe we can rid him. But like I say, I haven't seen him lately, so I don't know. Maybe he already took off.
One of the things we liked about this story at the radio station was that I took my tape recorder along, and he made a noise for me on cue 5 times. I said, "Will you make a noise for me so I can have it on the tape?" And he said, "Sure." So he did. And then I said, "Again, to be sure." And I asked him 5 times to make this noise, and he did it every time.
Huh. I remember reading one story in there, too, where you had the lady that would not let you record. You tried to record and...
Oh, yeah, that was a very interesting one because I started to turn the tape recorder on, and it wouldn't record. And so then the lady in whose house the house we were investigating, the lady went and got her tape recorder, and it wouldn't record either. And then I took out a pad and pencil, and the spirit said, "What's she doing? I don't want her writing down anything about me." And when it was all over, the tape recorder worked fine.
Okay. All right. Once she left, when she went into the spirit world or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't. She was a woman who lived as a recluse in the house in the neighborhood, and she was an unsavory character. The kids were all afraid of her, and she was just kind of mean.
Okay. Now, how many audio tapes do you have on all this stuff? I mean, you could actually release a haunting Halloween tape, I would imagine, couldn't you?
No, I don't have any anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually I have hundreds of tapes, and I suppose I have that one someplace, but I have no idea where it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, I appreciate talking to you, Dr. Hazel Denning, PhD.
And you know that the book can be ordered through, you just call 1-800-THE-MOON.
Right.
And it's Llewellyn Publishing Company. And
I was also told it was at Barnes & Noble, too, so they can pick it up right here in Muskegon, over at Barnes & Noble. But the book is called True Hauntings, Spirits with a Purpose, and I've enjoyed the book so far. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but I've enjoyed what I've read so far, and I appreciate talking to you.
Well, you're welcome. What station is this?
This is WKBZ in Muskegon, Michigan.
Oh, in Muskegon, Michigan.
Muskegon, Michigan.
I used to live in Michigan.
Did you?
Yes.
Was there many ghosts in Michigan?
I don't know. I was just a child then.
Well, keep up the good work, and like I say, I appreciate talking to you. Thank you very much.
It's been nice talking to you.
And take care.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Well, good morning. We're talking with Martin V. Ricardo, and the book is called Liquid Dreams of Vampires. Good morning.
Good morning, Oscar.
And you're over there in Chicago, I suppose enjoying the wonderful Chicago weather.
Yeah, we have a nice dreary day today.
It's a nice Halloween day, right?
Yeah, you could say that. Great for the Halloween season. Nice and dark out there.
Okay, Liquid Dreams of Vampires. Now, I didn't get a chance to read it completely, but for what I looked through it, it looks kind of like, I guess, the sexual fantasies of that people have about vampires and other things.
Well, the erotic aspects are certainly there, but the vampire has many dimensions to it. It's interesting that centuries ago, vampires started out as a terrifying superstition of the dead returning and attacking the living, but over the centuries, it's evolved into a dark, romantic fantasy for many people.
Really?
Oh, yes, there's a lot of eroticism, a lot of glamour. There are people who just want to be overwhelmed by a romantic figure, a mysterious stranger who dwells in a world of candles, moonlight, and gothic surroundings. There are those who want to be just captivated and overwhelmed by the animal magnetism of this otherworldly lover.
Huh. Now, see, you know, when I watch the old movies and stuff of vampires, and I saw a female vampire, she always kind of scared me a bit with the teeth. But you know, didn't the teeth in the eyes were always kind of strange too on vampires, and the blood on the side of the mouth, that kind of. Now, people actually were intrigued by things like that.
Well, that's the interesting part of it. People are frightened by the vampire, but because of the strange nature of the vampire, they are both frightened and attracted to it. And that's one of the things that surprises people about the vampire image, such as the actor Bela Lugosi had an overwhelming response from female admirers. He even had marriage proposals mailed out to him. Tremendous amount of fan mail for many different vampire actors, such as Jonathan Frid, who played Barnabas in the Dark Shadows TV series, for Christopher Lee, who played Dracula in many of the Hammer films. And so even though people are frightened by it, frightened by the teeth and the eyes and this overwhelming nature of the vampire, still there's a strange, compelling attraction. That's one of the intriguing things about vampires that make them different from other creatures like the Frankenstein monster or the mummy. They're kind of the attractive monsters in the horror world.
Okay, all right. You know, you mentioned one of my favorite old soap operas too, with the Barnabas Collins, the Dark Shadows thing. That was
Yes,
that was very unique. It was a very unique thing. It was like the first soap opera, the only soap opera that ever dealt with the unknown, so to speak.
Right. It still is unique. It still is a one-of-a-kind type of soap opera where they brought in all these gothic elements, a lot of the kind of creatures you'd see in the Universal horror films, but kind of transformed them into sometimes romantic figures, but particularly Barnabas the Vampire. The show was almost ready to be canceled when they introduced the vampire, and then suddenly there was a huge surge of popular interest in the show.
Also, the music became very popular too. The Quentin's theme and the Barnabas's thing.
Oh yes, that's
Weird.
even been re-released in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Many people still play that, and they've got all the old episodes on videotape. You go to some video stores, you'll see a whole rack of videos just on the old Dark Shadows series. People watch the whole thing from beginning to end.
And I've rented them. Yeah, I'm one of them. Yeah. Okay. Out of curiosity, what made you interested in vampires in the first place?
Well, I heard a lecture in the 1970s by a writer named Leonard Woolf. He wrote a book called A Dream of Dracula, covering a lot of the interesting mystique of the vampire. And I became intrigued. I also became fascinated by one of the first vampire movies I saw called Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, with Christopher Lee as Dracula. And he was just so powerful and majestic on the screen that I suddenly just developed a strong interest that grew over the years. Since the 1970s, I've been researching and writing and lecturing on the subject of vampires. I had a couple of books out in the early 80s, and now I have my new book, Liquid Dreams of Vampires, where I just decided to collect all these different strange dreams and fantasies of people to try and reveal what it is about the vampire that people are attracted to.
Now, where'd you find these people to write your book as far as their dreams?
Well, there is so much interest in vampires right now that there are over a dozen different vampire fan organizations and publications where I just put a little notice in there saying, please send me your vampire dreams and fantasies. And it took me about 6 years to put all the material together and write it up and finally get it published, but I had hundreds and hundreds of different accounts sent to me from people, some of them very strange, bizarre, otherworldly, but all of them showing a certain fascination with the vampire image.
Okay. Do you have any of your own fantasies about the vampires or dreams or anything like that? Or
Well, I've just had a few. I'm the kind of person where I don't have very strong memories of my dreams, but I do remember one dream I had where I was like in an underground bunker situation, and I was kind of locked in there where I knew there were some vampires wandering around or potentially ready to attack. It was kind of like a scenario from the movie Alien, only with vampires instead of the alien creature. And so that was pretty scary, and I've just had little bits and pieces I remember. But I can't say that I have any strong personal fantasies, but I am very interested in the vampire because I have written on different aspects. I've written on the old legends. I've written on different experiences people have had and how they just see the vampire in so many different aspects and so many different ranges. So I've covered the field and from many different aspects.
Okay, did you say you spent 5 or 6 years to get all this stuff together?
Actually, from the time I first started collecting the material to the time the book was published, it was about 6 years altogether.
Okay. Now, out of all these different ones, as far as ones either published in the book or not, can you name like a couple of your favorites, or just briefly kind of go over a little bit of what they're about?
Sure. Well, I had some really strange one. I had one gentleman write me about a dream where he was up to his knees in a room filled with blood, and the blood was swirling all around him, and that when he leaned his head back, droplets of blood would fall on his face. I thought that was kind of strange. Another one where a woman wrote me that she had dreamed she was in a car with her mother, brother, and her brother's girlfriend, and the car was in an accident where the 3 other passengers all had their heads decapitated, and she took the heads after the accident, poured the blood out of them into a cauldron, and she heard her little brother say that all the blood had to be mixed together into a oneness of eternal love. Now that's
a little weird.
Sampling of the kind of strange dreams people send me on this, but yeah, they can be very bizarre.
Now, as far as the most erotic, I guess, dream, what was? Okay, can you say that on the radio? I guess.
I don't
that's
know
a
if I
question.
can really tell you about the most erotic dreams that are in the book, but there was one woman who told me that in her dream she was like in a glass case with her boyfriend, and she would bite him all over his body where he would just have little driplets of blood, and she would lick off the blood while there would be a huge audience of people all around watching this demonstration of vampirism.
Okay.
So yes, some of the dreams can be pretty explicit, can be pretty wild. That's the interesting thing about the dreams. Most of them, the very large portion of them have to do with the vampire as a stranger and lover, somebody coming into their lives and overwhelming them, sometimes coming into a bedroom window and kind of seducing them in an otherworldly way. So that is certainly a very strong element to the dreams.
Okay. Now, do you think this, what Tom Cruise and what was it, Brad Pitt, the vampire movie? I can't remember the name of it.
Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, and they had that kind of erotic scenes in that also, as far as bringing actual women up there and killing them on stage in front of the people. It was kind of a weird movie.
Yeah,
but
it combined that element of terror, of very disturbing qualities, with the eroticism.
Yeah.
But other movies have done that as well. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, Christopher Lee was creating that kind of image where the women were actually responding to his bite as if they were very stimulated by what was going on, as if they really liked being bitten. And that has progressed through the years, where many of the vampire movies, I'm even thinking of low-budget films like the Count Yorga films, where the vampire came across as a very seductive, even though still frightening creature. But certainly the Interview with the Vampire added a lot. I mean, you take 2 of the most handsome box office stars and make them vampires. Certainly a lot of women are going to be attracted to that kind of image, even though they were also very frightening and terrifying creatures on the screen.
Yeah. Okay. In your book, it says something about vampire dreams becoming reality.
Right.
Now, what do you mean by that? Actually, people fulfill their dreams?
Well, there's different levels to that. In that particular chapter, I'm talking about people who have dreams of vampires, and then something in their real life, the real world, from the dream seems to come through. There are quite a few people I mentioned in the book who said they've dreamed of being bitten by a vampire, and when they woke up, they found bite marks on their neck, and sometimes even stains of blood. And so they tend to think that maybe there was something to the dream more than just fantasy, that something really happened to them in the night. Now, there's other explanations for that. There's a possibility they themselves may have reached up to their neck during the dream and scratched themselves, or they may have cut themselves in some kind of medallion in their sleep, and they incorporated in the dream that image of a vampire biting them. There just could have been marks there they never noticed before. There could be all kinds of other explanations, but some people really feel that something happened to them in their dream that came through into their real life. But even stranger than that, there are some people who've said that the vampire they saw in their dream appeared in their real life. There's a case of one gentleman in the book who said that he dreamed that he was in a nightclub where he met a female vampire, and this female vampire was telling him about the possibility of really becoming a vampire, what real possibilities are. And then he said he woke up from the dream, but when he woke up, he saw this female vampire sitting on the bed next to him. And that eventually, talking a little bit to her while she was there on the bed, she leaned over to bite him, and then he just kind of blacked out. He just kind of drifted right back into some kind of sleep again.
Wimp.
Right, but of course, he thinks it might have been the mesmerizing power of the female vampire. But even stranger, it gets even more strange after that. He said that in his real life, after that, he would be in public places, and he would look up, and in the distance, he would see this female vampire. He would immediately get up and run toward her, but then she'd be gone. And he said this happened to him a number of times. So when we talk about dreams coming into reality, yeah, some strange things have been sent to me, some strange stories.
Now, have any of these people been checked out as far as whether they're kind of like on the edge?
Well, no, I have to take their word. I mean, these are people who seem sincere. They write me their accounts, their stories, and, some of them have said they would swear on the Bible that what they're telling me is true. Now, everyone has to decide if they want to take it with a grain of salt or with a clove of garlic. That's their choice. But I'm just basically giving the accounts that people sent me, and you can take it or leave it. They do seem pretty strange at times. Okay,
all right, because you think that people that believe in vampires, the Bible probably wouldn't focus too much on them anyway. But anyway, have you ever found any really true blood drinkers in your studies at all? Or?
Oh, of course. In fact, I have a whole chapter dealing with mortal vampires and blood drinkers. Right. Quite often, these are people who have just become so fascinated with the vampire image that they want to experience it. They want to live it in their own way. And many of these people do develop a real compulsion, a real craving to drink blood. Sometimes it is so strong that it just becomes overwhelming in their lives. Now, these are not people who attack others. They do not force anyone to get their blood from them. This is not any kind of assault, but they get voluntary donors. They take just very small amounts of blood from the donors, and they describe all kinds of different experiences. Some describe it as being like a drug high. Some describe it as being a sense of strong connection and intimacy with a person. Others just say it just has a lot of personal meaning for them to just take these little drops of blood from other people, usually partners, usually romantic partners or mates in some way. And so, yeah, the compulsion to want to be a vampire can be very strong in some people.
Huh. That's weird. I tell you, one of the most erotic vampire movies I think I've ever seen was the one with was it Catherine Duvall and David Bowie? Yeah, The Hunger.
Catherine
Deneuve. Okay, that's it. And I can't remember the other Susan Sarandon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Now that was of course it had a little lesbian action there in the whole bit. I mean that was very erotic vampire movie.
And you see, that's another aspect of the vampire is that the vampire movie and vampire novels can imply all kinds of alternative sexuality without having to specifically state that's what's going on. In other words, it's just supposed to be the drinking of blood from one person to another, but there's all kinds of sexual and erotic intimations involved with all this. So a lot of people could watch The Hunger, and there's some people who wouldn't even catch on, how much of the erotic element is going on, at least not catch on consciously, even though they're being affected subconsciously by what's happening. So that's another interesting aspect of the vampire that I cover in a section on forbidden passions. Many different things can happen in a vampire movie that can affect us on a subconscious level.
Now, have you ever got any letters on some people that were you might have thought were a little on the edge, and you were a little worried for them proceeding a little too far?
Well, certainly. In fact, as I was saying, some people become so obsessed with the whole idea of drinking blood and being like a vampire that it has negatively affected their lives. To a tremendous extent, I've had at least 3 women write me telling me that their husbands left them because of their desire to drink blood. So, yeah, certainly people have gone over the edge. Some people have just become so compelled by this desire to drink blood that it has just totally disrupted their lives. So, yeah, negative things can happen.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to finishing your book.
Great.
I've been reading it. I'm looking forward to finishing your book so I can. I had so many different haunting books to read that I've been skimming through all of them. But
Halloween season has a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, this is true. But the name of the book is Liquid Dreams of Vampires, Martin V. Ricardo, and of course you can get your books at Barnes & Noble, or they can call 1-800-THE-MOON.
Right.
Now, that number always scared me, though, because, the moon...
Had a book, and I saw one out there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Eagle 97 Talking Tunes.
I got a question for Jerry.
Okay, we got Jerry here, our UFO
I
expert.
love talking to Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry.
And Jerry loves to talk.
Right. 2 years ago.
On UFOs especially.
For you non-believers, about 2 years ago, there was a sighting around the Saugatuck Holland area over Lake Michigan that to this day no one knows what happened. What's the update on that, Jerry? Have you heard anything?
No, and the funny part of it is Oscar called me an expert. I am not an expert. All I know is what I really saw myself as expert. And I have my own opinions on what I think of it. And because Oscar did tell you that I had an afterlife experience, death, whatever, when my son was born, and he's nearly 42 years old, I was gone. The doctor said I watched him write down the time that I left and everything. And so I went down the tunnel, and they said I was gone 10 minutes. It seemed like a year. But after that, and I came back, it changed. And people will tell you this, anybody that has had that experience, it did change my whole life. I have no prejudices other than people that are evil. And I believe there is a God because I saw it, and I believe there is a hell. And I've heard things since then that the man that killed all those children in Scotland in that school, there was a man at the same time having a heart attack and was having one of these experiences, and he met this man on his way to hell, and he said he'd never wanted to ever go through that again, and it changed his whole life because he felt like he was going to shape up. And I'm not a religious fanatic, but I do know after what you see, and it's like, and I'm one in thousands and thousands, and people